Afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the very first Cyber Business Uplift series. I can see there's still a few people coming in now, so we may as well kick off because otherwise we will run out of time and we won't be able to get through everything that we need to discuss. So thank you for joining us if you've already joined us, and I hope you are able to get something out of today's session. First and foremost, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land. Although we're meeting virtually right now, we continue to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land that have for many thousands of years walked upon, cared for, and continue to care for on where we are individually located. I'm currently on Darug land in the local government area of Blacktown, so I would like to pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging, to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders, as well as those from the Darug Nation in particular, and any of our colleagues who may be with us here now. I think this is a very important thing to notice and to keep acknowledging, especially given what is happening around the world, as we see many countries, in particular the United States, going through what it is that they are going through. Quite a timely occasion and time of the year, considering we have just gone through our National Reconciliation Week. Despite this international pandemic, we have been able to celebrate and acknowledge here in Australia, and in particular where I am in Western Sydney, the fantastic work that's happening in terms of working towards reconciliation. And although there's fantastic things happening, there's a lot of work yet to be done, as we can all agree. So thank you for joining us. As you can see on the screen in front of you, this first session today is all about protecting your organisation from cyber threats during COVID-19. Very much a hot topic at the moment. So I was hoping that this would be something that Western Sydney Community Forum would be able to do, and we are absolutely pleased to be able to partner with the New South Wales Innovation Node and AusCyber, as well as New South Wales Treasury, to be able to host a series of sessions like this. So thank you for joining us once again. As you can see on the screen, we have a Mentimeter going. So this is simply just to gauge your understanding of cybersecurity. It's a simple one-question Mentimeter survey. If you can please go to menti.com and insert the code 569199. That's displayed up on the screen. That code there will send you to a survey which has that one question, just to gauge where our participants are up to. At the end of today's presentation, we will be doing the same question just to see if there's been any gains from the presentation. Speaking of presentations, our guest speaker today is Tony Vizza, who you'll be introduced to shortly. Before we do that, I would like to reiterate that this is an interactive session. Even though we have got Tony here as a guest speaker, please do send through your questions. You'll see located at the bottom of your screen a chat, a Q&A chat, as well as a raise a hand function. Please make the most of this opportunity to ask Tony questions, ask Stephenie from the Innovation Node as well questions. This is a fantastic opportunity to do that, so please ensure that you take most advantage of that. We're also streaming live on YouTube right now, so if you're watching from YouTube, welcome as well. And there's also a chat function there, which one of our staff members will be monitoring. If you have a question through that chat function, please raise that question, place a comment, and one of our staff members will display that question up on our screen and ask it to Tony or to whoever you wish to ask that to. So without further ado, we will be presenting and now introducing Stephenie. Welcome, Stephenie, as she pops up her screen. So Stephenie is from the New South Wales Cybersecurity Innovation Node. And if you won't mind, Stephenie, showing everybody your face and your microphone, that'll be fantastic.
Hey, Nadiana, thanks for that welcome. Unfortunately, I'm unable to start my video. For some reason, it says that, oh, there we go. Pleasure. Great, there I am. Hi, everybody. Nice to meet you. And thank you, Nadiana, for that warm welcome. I'm Stephenie Andal, and I'm the manager of the New South Wales Cybersecurity Innovation Node. And we're really thrilled today to be partnering together with Western Sydney Community Forum and the team over there, headed up by Nadiana, to be starting this series. I think it's really a fantastic opportunity, given the COVID lockdown period that we all find ourselves in, to be talking about such pressing issues around cybersecurity. So we really hope that today, this session will really hit the mark as it comes to pertinent information for you to protect your business moving ahead. And we're really keen to get your feedback via the Menti piece, just so we can make sure that we're really hitting the mark in that capacity. So welcome aboard today. Just for your awareness, the New South Wales Cybersecurity Innovation Node, we are an organization that is funded by both Commonwealth Government and New South Wales Government. And it's our mandate to be building awareness and resiliency around cybersecurity across New South Wales and the entire country. So we're really pleased to be speaking with you all today. And it's our job to be really raising small businesses and not-for-profits businesses awareness of cybersecurity. And any opportunity that we have to be feeding into that is fantastic. And this series is really kicking off that piece of work. I'm based in the Sydney CBD typically, although today I'm coming from the East. And Western Sydney is a part of Sydney Metro that as of yet the node hasn't had as much of a reach into as possible. So it's only with the fantastic collaboration on behalf of Western Sydney Community Forum today that we're getting to have access and conversation with you to hear what you need. So this series is designed to be a really accessible, jargon-free and approachable format for your organizations to really understand and get further information on uplifting your cyber hygiene or areas that you think might be of concern to you. So we're really interested in your feedback and comments as to how this session can be shaped, because we want to make sure it's valuable for your time. So please send those across today and in the days forthcoming. And we're really pleased today to kick off this series with our speaker, which is Tony Vizza, as Nadiana has already expressed. And I'm really proud to have Tony on board today. Tony is actually a cyber ambassador for the New South Wales Cybersecurity Innovation Node. And in a nutshell, cyber ambassadors are essentially cyber ninjas for the node that are really passionate about growing cybersecurity awareness across New South Wales. And they speak on the node's behalf and behalf of the cybersecurity sector at school events, at high schools, at different industry forums, and at grassroots organizations to really be spreading the good word of cybersecurity and how and why people and companies can be building their cybersecurity awareness and raising their posture. So Tony's a fantastic cyber ambassador for our organization. He also sits on the AISA board, which is the largest peak body in Australia for the cybersecurity sector. And so he does a lot of advocacy work in that capacity. And he's also, his day job, apart from all of the other stuff that he does, he is the director for cybersecurity advocacy for the APAC region for an organization called ISC Squared. And they are a fantastic organization as well, doing terrific work around qualifications in cybersecurity. So Tony's going to be great today. He's got a great way to be presenting information to you, and I'm really happy to hand it over to him. So here we go.
Thank you very much, Steph. I'm just going to turn my video on so that start my video. There we go. Hello, everyone. Tony Vizza here. Thank you so much again, Steph, for the really warm introduction. What I will do now is share my screen so that you can see today's presentation. And today's presentation will talk all about some of the cybersecurity essentials. Now, while it's been framed as a bit of a COVID themed presentation, it really is quite general in nature. When I say general, it really applies to cybersecurity on a day-to-day level. And I'm going to talk about some of the things that have been going on in the world over the last few months and few years, and some of the problems and how to solve those. So without further ado, my name is Tony. I've got what I call the veritable alphabet soup of qualifications, certifications around cybersecurity, and I've done this for a fair period of time. And I'm also on the board member of AISA. So Who is AISA? As Steph alluded to, the largest not-for-profit association of cybersecurity professionals in Australia. It also includes enthusiasts, students and advocates as well within that body. And it is the peak body for information security, for cybersecurity and for privacy as well. It was established in 1999 and has over 6,000 members and associates across 9 branches, as well as a cloud branch. So there's a lot of people, of course, in Australia that are not in any of the capital cities. There's a cloud branch for those people to be able to access the AISA knowledge and services. So let's start off with the concept of working from home. And I know that all of us today on the panel are actually working from home. For those of you who have families, this scene may be quite familiar to you. You know, trying to get a job done while you've got the kids all over you, trying to focus on your job when the kids like to walk into the room, or maybe as a cat or a dog or something or other. We're all been sort of familiarised with this over the last few months, and this is quite new for many people. And it really is difficult to sort of try to do a job as well as try to deal with these distractions. Now, in light of that, we've also got to be mindful of the fact that, of course, given the era that we live in today, there's a lot of people who are quite concerned, they're quite worried. There's a lot of personal lives have been affected quite profoundly, and we've seen that disruption. We had some unfortunate news with regards to the economy yesterday. That being said, we are trending pretty well when it comes to our health data. I just read an update just before we started saying that there's been no community transmissions in New South Wales for the last week, which is fantastic. So we are doing reasonably well on that front. Now, with all of this has come a really significant and disturbing set of developments around cybersecurity. The level of cybercrime has absolutely increased exponentially. I'm going to talk about what that's looked like. However, what I did want to allude to is the fact that while cybercrime has been increasing, the problem is actually already there. It was there before we even started. Now, this report that I'm referring to is a report that was published by the Office of the Australian Information Commissioner. That's an Australian federal government body. And they are tasked with being the regulatory body to deal with data breaches. Now, this report that I'm taking these figures out of was published in January of this year and referred to data from July to December of last year. So as of the end of December, the number of breaches that occurred was actually up on previous quarters and previous years. The number of attacks was actually up. So the problem has already existed. It was there before COVID-19 ever became well known by anybody. And then, of course, since then, the situation has become considerably worse. So if we look at some data that's come out of the FBI in the US, the FBI has reported a quadrupling of cyber breaches during the COVID-19 pandemic. And here in Australia, the Australian Cybersecurity Centre, which is the federal government body that looks after all matters cyber related, has had to issue almost daily updates around some of the cyber scams that are going on that face Australians. And this has become a really big problem. And I would argue, second to the actual health issues of COVID-19 at the moment, it's affecting businesses. There's been high-profile businesses that have been breached and been in the news. There's been a lot of small businesses that have been hit that don't make the news, but just because they don't make the news doesn't mean it doesn't happen. So mindful of all of this, what I like to illustrate to you is there's a reason why hackers do this. You know, it's not just a teenager in mum's basement who's decided to be a little bit of a pain in the backside. They do it because it is lucrative. They do it because there is a lot of money to be made when it comes to hacking. This information comes from a report that was published by Symantec called the Internet Security Threat Report. They publish one every year. And it illustrates the amount of money that a typical hacker will make when they actually perpetrate one of these breaches. There is a lot of money to be made here. And the chances of being arrested and incriminated are very, very slim for these people, and they know it. And as a result of that, they go off on their merry ways and perform what is a criminal act. Now, why are hackers successful? And why do they do what they do and they're successful at it is because there's actually a workforce gap of people around the world and in Australia. In Australia, the organisation I work for, which is AISC squared, has published research that suggests we have a gap of 47,000 people who have a lack of cybersecurity skills and experience to be able to deal with some of these issues. And cyber criminals, unfortunately, are outspending defenders. The good guys are being outspent by the bad guys. And depending on who you ask, vendors such as Carbon Black will say 10 to 1, we're being outspent. HPE or DXC, as they call themselves these days, 2 to 1. Conventional wisdom in my industry says a 4 to 1 outspending. So we're outmanned and outgunned is the frank assessment at the moment. Many people will ask me and say, Tony, how do I know that I'm not going to get targeted, or how do I know, am I going to get targeted? How do I work this out? Well, there's a very magic formula. It's very simple. Do you have information that's valuable to somebody? Are the level of defenses that you have sufficient to protect that information? Now, if you have really valuable information and your level of defenses to protect that are poor, you're probably going to have problems. If you have information that's not all that valuable and you have really good defenses, then you're probably quite safe. And this is really what you need to be considering as an organization and as a human being. One of the saddest stories that I've heard from anyone who I spoke to in regards to breaches was a gentleman who worked for a very large insurance company, and we had a meeting one day, and he said to me, he said, I had all of my family photos crypto locked. I had grandkids and all their pictures, baby pictures, all crypto locked, and the hackers wanted $1 per photo, and I had to pick about 500 odd photos that I chose to keep, and I lost all the rest of them. That information is invaluable to a person, and this is what hackers use in order to be able to leverage, what they're doing to make money out of it and to create all the harm that they create. So, how do we deal with this problem? First thing that we need to do is acceptance. We need to accept that it's a problem. The same way that people accept that property crime is a problem, vandalism is a problem, cybersecurity and cyber breaches and hackers exist. They're going to exist for a long time to come, and we need to accept that reality. Now, how do we deal with it? We also need to accept that, for better or worse, what I'm showing you right now is literally what the internet looks like. It is a sewer. Now, as professionals, our job is to turn this into drinking water. And you're not going to do it by taking it and putting it in a glass. You need to treat it. You need to make sure that all the germs are taken out of it. And you need to make sure that you test it, make sure it's safe. And then, of course, it can be consumed. Our aim, of course, is to purify this. However, be mindful that, like any system, at times, things can go wrong. And if you're a cybersecurity professional that accepts that and has plans in place to deal with when things go wrong, then you're going to be one step ahead and be able to deal with these issues as they come up. The other thing that we need to accept as well, this is an illustration of William Bligh, who was stuck under his bed trying to hide from the New South Wales Rum Corps, is that hackers, they don't take it personally. It's nothing personal against you. They're out to get your money. So if you do get breached, if you do have a ransomware attack, don't take it personally. It's purely the fact that, you know what, you're a target and they're there and they're gonna make the most of it, and they're gonna try to make as much money quickly as they can. So solutions. Let's look at some solutions. Let's consider some absolutes first of all. Robert Morris was a gentleman who worked in the US National Security Agency who since passed away, but he had 3 golden rules to computer security. Do not own a computer, do not power it on, and do not use it. Now, the reality of the situation is that this is not practical. It's simply something that we, in the modern era, are not privy to be able to do unless we all want to go back to notepads and pens and paper and fax machines. So in order to deal with the problem, we need to understand a little bit better. Hacks and breaches occur because of 3 things taking place. One is you've got an external intruder who is looking to make the most of what you've got available. 2 is you've got systems that are being poorly designed, poorly maintained, poorly monitored. And the 3rd is that you've got a lack of user education, potentially poor organizational processes. Now, for a breach to take place, typically speaking, 2 of these 3 things need to occur. And the worst instances will be when all 3 of them occur. And there was a show called Hogan's Heroes that I used to watch as a kid, and I really enjoyed. And there was a gentleman who was in that show called Newkirk, and he used to pick locks, and he would exploit a vulnerability in a lock and be able to get to the crown jewels. And that's how hackers work, is they exploit issues that exist and make the most of it. I also want you to consider this. Information, according to the Information Commissioner's offices in the UK, they published a report that suggested that hackers cause 27 to 45% of breaches. However, employees of an organisation cause 55 to 73% of breaches. Generally because what happens, of course, is that a lot of employees will make a mistake. They'll click on an email that they weren't meant to have clicked on, or they'll share a document by accident. I've sent emails by accident to people, and I'm in the know here, right? So it's also important to think of the fact that your employees could potentially be a source of breach, and that there are ways to deal with that issue. And you just got to make sure that as an organisation you've taken that into consideration. I talked about poor systems design. I'll give you a different absolute here. Let's have a look at this lock. This is a lock for a bicycle, and it's $200 odd US. Now, let's consider this bike. This bike is a Cannondale System 6 High Mod Dura-Ace Di2 Tour de France bike worth $11,500. Do you think this lock is a suitable lock for this bike? Inversely, do you think that this lock is a suitable lock for this bike, which is a rusty old bike? Now, we have a saying in our industry: you don't use a $100 lock on a $5 system, right? And it's important to think about the fact that a lot of the times you can actually overdo your protections. By the same token, there are also instances where there's not enough being done. And here are some illustrations that sort of point to some of the things that we talk about in our industry. So we talk about something called BYOD, bring your own device. Some organizations don't have a BYOD policy. And this fence is a really good visual example of what that looks like for an organization's cybersecurity. The picture that says not enough security. This is a photo I took in India of a lady who was loading some ATMs up, and you can see the wads of cash at her feet. There was nothing between me, her, and those wads of cash. And not enough security. Misconfigured systems, where you might have a firewall, for instance, that's not configured properly, and this security guard is doing a fantastic job of searching everyone going into wherever they're going into. Expired licenses. So a lot of organizations will invest money in solutions, but then will not renew the licenses, and that's effectively a broken fence. Or unpatched systems, which this illustration sort of alludes to. There are also instances where sometimes really expensive technology is not deployed properly. Here is on the left-hand side, a very expensive security gate, which also serves as a ladder to get into a premises. And on the right-hand side, here is something that looks like a lock. And for all intents and purposes, from the other side of that door, the door is locked, but I push and the twisty breaks. We then have lack of user education. So we have people such as unqualified staff, untrained or otherwise unmotivated staff, or lack of organizational due diligence. Now that photo on the right-hand side was taken from a photo from a prison in Georgia in the US, where 68 knives were found. So when we talk cybersecurity, we're actually talking very similar sorts of analogies when it comes to actual solutions. So humans are the problem. However, humans are also the solution to this problem. And I'm going to talk about how we actually solve that. I'll try to be as quick as possible, mindful, of course, of time. There is a joke that goes around, and this is another absolute, that if we want to solve cybersecurity, we take the humans away and we put the machines in charge, and then we don't have any breaches. And this is kind of a comical way of looking at that. If we are going to solve the problem, what we need to do is we need to address 3 specific areas within cybersecurity: people, process, and technology. We need to look at people, we need to look at organizational process, we also need to look at the technology that solves some of those issues. A lot of organizations are really good at the technology piece. They have vendors coming in there talking to them about how amazing their solution is and what it does for them, but there's no awareness and training or skills and certifications around the people that are administering that, and there's no process either. The number of organizations that get breached because one of their senior managers rings up their IT staff and says, listen, I need to access this website. I need you to open up my access or give me administrative access. You'll be surprised. So that's a process issue. Now, what I like to say to people when dealing with cybersecurity is, and I'll take this from Jacinda Ardern, who gave some advice to New Zealanders at the beginning of this epidemic. She said, always assume you have COVID-19. So drawing from this, I like to say, always assume that you've been hacked. Always assume that your house, for instance, has been physically broken into. What would you do if your house had been broken into? You'd make sure your family's safe, your valuables are safe, important documents are safe. You would look around to determine how someone can break into your house, and you'd look at mitigating those vulnerabilities. That's what you would do if it was a home situation. When it comes to a cyber situation, it's very, very similar. This particular slide is quite heavy, and I'm going to, what I'll do as part of today is I'll make sure that the slide deck is shared with you. But this is a typical home or small office network. And what I've listed here is some very common, very, very basic items that you should be looking into to make sure that your network is at least protected, particularly now that people are working from home. We look at four main aspects of a typical small business network. You look at the computers themselves, which are often a critical source of vulnerabilities and breaches. We look at mobile devices. We look at routers, access points, switches that you might have as part of your network infrastructure. And then, of course, we finish off with devices such as NASs or printers or smart TVs that you might have. And dealing with some of those issues with those particular devices is going to go a long way into solving this problem. Now, I also want you to be mindful of the fact that there is a lot to be done. So for a lot of organizations, this is simply not something that a one-person organization is probably going to have the bandwidth to do. So they are going to need to rely on people who are skilled and experienced in these matters. Now, if you want to get a better understanding in terms of what, as an organization and as a person, you might want to do to prevent cyber breaches for yourself, the Australian Signals Directorate, who run the Australian Cybersecurity Centre, has what's called the Essential 8. The ASD Essential 8 are the 8 steps that you can perform as an organization or as a human being to prevent breaches. And these includes things such as application whitelisting. That effectively means making sure that whatever applications you're using, A, you actually need, and if you don't need, get rid of. B, if you are actually using it, you make sure that only those applications are allowed. Patching applications, disabling untrusted macros for Microsoft Office. User application hardening. That's a fancy way of saying making sure that the settings on your applications are actually secure. Restricting administrative privileges. How many people like to use their computers as an administrator at all times? That's a serious problem that you really need to address. Patching operating systems, multi-factor authentication, and then backing up your data daily. Now, there is a document you can download from the ACSC website. I invite you to do so because this is a really good resource and it's free. The ASD, the Australian Signals Directorate, has also published the Small Business Cybersecurity Guide. This is a really good, easy to understand guide to help small businesses particularly understand what some of these cyber issues are about, how they're going to affect you, and what you can do about them. Again, available from the ASD website. The government has also published the ASD COVID-19 guide for working from home. This is a really timely topic, of course, and this is something that I invite you to have a look at and download and follow. But in a nutshell, what this guide will talk about is it'll talk about scams, beware of scams. It'll talk about using strong and unique passphrases and passwords, and a bunch of other things that you can actually do in order to protect yourself. There is also the mentality that I use. This is an X-Files, for those who used to watch the X-Files. I want to believe, trust no one. Practice zero trust. Assume that your network has been breached. And if you do that, you'll make sure that you have your data backed up daily. You'll always be in a protective mindset so that you're assuming that a hacker's broken into your system, you need to protect it. And that's the best way to actually deal with these sorts of issues. Now, very, very briefly, I'm going to talk about some very specific COVID-related examples. This is me in my environment where I don't have a virtual backdrop. And I've set this up here to give you a bit of an idea in terms of when I'm using a Zoom call, some of the information that I give away to people who I may not necessarily know. Some of you are even in this call. There's some obvious cues here. I've got some jokes, of course, here. But then if you look closely, there's also a bunch of other things that can detail a whole bunch of personal information about me that for someone who might want to social media engineer me to break into my network and my systems could use valuably. A lot of these hackers use Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and a whole bunch of other areas to determine passwords and the like. So it is a very, very critical area, particularly these days with COVID-19. How do you deal with these sorts of things? Set up private meetings, set up passwords on meetings, learn to use mute, stop video, enable virtual background and the like. If we consider the home setting, we all live at home. We have a whole bunch of people living in our home. Some of us have got devices given to us by schools, for instance, or work, or whatever it might be. Keeping that in mind when you're dealing with making sure that vulnerabilities are dealt with from those devices is really, really critical. Again, particularly if you've got younger children who have devices brought to them from schools or whatever it might be, these are vectors for people to get in if they're not patched, looked after, etc., etc. So just be mindful of that as well. Finally, if you don't know, and if you do feel as though this is an area that is actually one that your business needs to look at seriously, I suggest that you look at people who have expert advice. These are some of the certifications that will denote the people who are certified, qualified in cybersecurity that you can talk to and can help you with these sorts of things. AISA, who I've talked about, is also a really good resource to leverage, because there are people within AISA who will have these certifications and will be able to help you make sure that your business is best protected. Finally, if you are interested and you're a bit of an enthusiast about this sort of stuff and you do want to join AISA, we welcome all members who are interested in cybersecurity. If you're a student, there's actually free membership. Visit the website and you can learn a little bit more about what AISA does. With that, I would like to say thank you. I am now open to any questions that you may have. And if there's anything that I can do to help, would love to have that opportunity. Thank you.
Awesome. Tony, there is one question that I can see here, and we might just jump straight into it.
Sure.
If anybody, please pose your questions. If you don't feel comfortable stating your name, more than happy for you to ask your questions anonymously. I believe the Q&A has that option. So I know for myself, I tend to not want to ask any questions that I may think is a little bit silly, but there's no silly questions. Feel free to ask any questions that you have. And same goes with our YouTube channel. So if that's something that you wanted to ask, that stream is available there as well. So Tony, I'm not sure if you can see here, we've got one question here from Dex Black.
Yes.
And the question was posed early on in the session at 12:08, so nice and early. So I'm glad you knew, Dex, that this was something that you could use, so that's fantastic. So does Zoom comply with security requirements for government work?
Good, very, very good question. So the way that Zoom, so with government work, it all depends on what classification that government work is at. I would dare say that if it was at a top secret capacity, the answer would definitely be no. For an information session such as here, the answer is absolutely. We're not discussing anything that's from a government perspective sensitive. So there's no reason why we couldn't use something like Zoom. Of course, we would make sure that using Zoom will come with the appropriate levels of controls in place to make sure that none of those security vulnerabilities that are so well known about in Zoom these days are exploited. So there will be passwords that you need to log in. There'll be wait rooms so that when people come in, you actually let them in to avoid Zoom bombing, for instance. So the answer is it depends on the work that the government's doing. It could be yes, it could be no. Hope that helps.
Wonderful. Best kind of answers, Tony. Another question here from also Dex Black just recently. So the audience may benefit from your opinion on using password managers. So Tony, could you share your opinion, your perspective on that?
So password managers are really useful. However, you also need to be really careful because in the olden days, and I remember this from parents and grandparents and the like, They used to write all of their, passwords and things in a notepad or a notebook that they'd keep in the top drawer of their desk at home. So that meant if I knew where that was, I could basically get all that information in a nice, neat little notebook, right? Password managers are exactly the same. You need to make sure that the password manager itself is one that's very robust in terms of being able to store that information, and two, that you actually protect that password manager as well. So the answer is yes, they're very useful, because it's very unlikely that you're going to be able to remember all the passwords that you use for all the different sites and services that you have, but you also need to exercise caution and discretion.
Sorry. Need to get more tech savvy, I think. Forget that. I'm always on mute. Thanks for sharing your opinion on that one, Tony. So we do have some more questions coming in. However, I might take this opportunity to introduce Matt Trussman. So Matt Trussman is one of the New South Wales Business Connect advisors at New South Wales Government, and he also is part of the Realise business. That's his own business. And the Realise business is a consultant for New South Wales Government, particularly New South Wales Treasury. This is aimed to assist small businesses such as yourselves who are here, whether it's a for-profit, not-for-profit, you work for the community sector or not. It's aimed at assisting small businesses in finding their local advisors, and as having a go-to person per se to really support them with any kind of cybersecurity needs and information they may need, or just ask any questions. So I might just throw over to you, Matt, now, just to talk a little bit about yourself and some of the opportunities that you are able to provide for us.
Are you able to hear me now? Perfect. Okay, that's great. Thank you. Yeah, well, you've pretty much wrapped up very well what Business Connect is, but I'll just rehash that for anybody that is interested. So Business Connect is a program run by the New South Wales Department of Treasury. It's been around for about, I think, 10, 11 years now, under a couple of different monikers, but essentially it's designed to support anyone with a small business, anyone that has an ABN, anyone that is starting a business or has been running a business for a number of years that needs some additional confidential support, mentoring, advising, and coaching, depending on what the business needs. Business Connect is run through a number of different what we call chapters around New South Wales. So Business Connect is available in regional New South Wales. It's available in the Hunter Valley, up as far as Newcastle, Western Sydney, and down to the Sutherland Shire. And effectively, any business owner, any founder that wants to get a different opinion, get a different perspective, again, get that confidential support, unbiased support for free. And that's I guess that's the interesting bit, that the government funds this program. So any business owner is entitled to receive up to it's 4 hours for free, and then there's a subsidised package beyond that, which is pretty affordable. I think at last count it was around $49 an hour for an additional 30 hours of support. So it's super affordable. The team that I work for and represent, we work with over 2,000 business owners, startups, entrepreneurs across a whole range of different industries last year. I've won a number of awards for doing that, and most of the advisors in that group have all owned businesses, run businesses, have kind of been on that journey, much like business owners today. So we can help with strategy, we can help with business planning, we can help with raising capital, introducing those firms to government grants, intermediaries to help to expand overseas, and really just become that trusted advisor to the business owner. So that, in a nutshell, is really what the service is. You can access more information on the Government Business Connect website. So if you just want to Google Business Connect New South Wales, you can actually then go in there, register for free, and there is also a directory of advisors all around the country, all around the state, sorry, that are available for you to have a look at their profiles, see if they match up with the sort of experience that you need or the support that you need, and you can engage them directly through that platform. Fantastic program, fully funded by the government. Highly recommend everybody, if they need an extra view point or perspective, to have a look at the Business Connect website. That's kind of it, Nadiana, in a nutshell.
Wonderful. So you said I said it all, but I clearly didn't. So thanks for that, Matt. Fantastic. And I'm aware that you do have to go, so thank you for popping in. Everybody, we will be providing all of you who participated today with all these contact details. So Matt, I'm sure you'll be getting people consulting you and asking you many questions. So thanks.
Sure. I'll just also say, people, you can find me on LinkedIn. That's usually the best channel. So feel free to drop me a note there and I can share with you any more information that I have and let you know how best to move forward.
Wonderful. Thanks very much for joining us, Matt.
No problem. Have a great weekend.
You too.
Ciao.
Okay, so we might open it back up. Hope everyone's keeping on their toes, jumping from one screen to the other. So Tony, if you don't mind popping back up, and I'll also invite Stephenie to jump on as well, just to answer a few of the following questions that we've got through our Q&A and our chat. So we do have 15 minutes. So if you do have any other questions or anything like that, as I said, I'm going to reiterate, make sure you ask them through our Q&A, our chat box, or raise your hand if you want to hear your own voice. So the next question that we've got here is from Vince. So Tony's already answered this. However, I might just let everybody in the audience know. So Vince has asked, a hacker could be hiding small snooping programs in, let's just say, a picture of a cute kitten or a fun Android game. So how can the average Joe, such as myself, for example, and many of us here, ever know that what they download is the real picture or app with no hidden malware in it? Tony, can you just talk us through the answer you've provided in the text?
Sure. First thing to do is just make sure that if you are downloading anything, you're downloading it from the official App Store. So whatever platform that you're using, it's the official App Store. In fact, I know that with the Mac operating system these days, it is almost impossible to install anything that's not officially available. They make it very difficult for you to do that, in part to protect you against some of the, let's say, fake apps that are out there that are actually posing as legitimate apps that are actually there to infiltrate your system. Secondly, make sure that you have really good endpoint protection. What does that mean? It means make sure that you have good antivirus, as we used to call it in the olden days, which does a lot more than just antivirus these days. It actually can scan for certain patterns that are known to be malware, and that pattern could be part of a photo, for instance, that it can then quarantine to make sure it doesn't get into your system.
Well, I don't know about everyone else, but I know I learned something. The endpoint, didn't know that was a thing. So thank you. So we've got another question here from Dex Black. Thank you, Dex Black, for posing so many questions. It's, yeah, great to see the interest. So finally, multi-factor authentication. What key accounts should you use that on? And could you provide us with some examples? And I'm also aware, Tony, that you did answer this question as well, but I might ask you to please just talk us through that as well.
Sure. If you are using a service that has a multi-factor authentication available, so multi-factor authentication is something you know and something that you have, and it's a two-step process. For those of you that might have used MyGov, for instance, that's an example of a two-factor authentication system where you put a password in, it then sends you a text message with a token, and then you need to use that token to get full access. So that's what multi-factor authentication is. Where should you use it? Everywhere possible is the short answer. In particular, anywhere that is keeping personal information about you, name, address, phone number, dates of birth, whatever it might be. If there's multi-factor authentication available, use it. It's highly valuable.
Brilliant. Thank you. I might jump back to the chats box that we've got. And Stephenie, I believe that question came from you. And you're on mute. So I'm glad to see it wasn't just me.
No, it's not just you, it's me as well. I guess I've got a question there for Tony about removing untrusted apps and just sort of identifying whether apps can be trusted or not trusted. And then a second question around trusted Wi-Fi networks. What are some certain things that we can look for?
Okay, so let's look at apps first of all. Typically, if they're listed on an app store, then they're generally trusted. The truth with apps is that if you do not need it, get rid of it. It's as simple as that. The more apps you have, the more possible vectors you have for people to actually get into your system. So I periodically will go through my computer. If I'm not using an app anymore, if I'm not using a program, I'll just uninstall it and get rid of it altogether. And that will help considerably. different operating systems. I know that Mac particularly, because that's what I use, if something has gone, if it's no longer supported, it'll just stop you from using that app and say you need to download the latest version of that app to continue here. Steph, what was the second part of the question?
So the second part was actually another question completely, but just one about how can you tell what is a trusted Wi-Fi network, and what are the things to look for when you're procuring something like that?
Good question. Another very, very good question. So a trusted.
We're going to trip you up if we can, right?
Yep. So the way that I consider whether something's trusted or not is, do I know how it's set up? Do I know what it's done? Do you know how it's configured and the like? To me, that's trusted, right? If something is not something that you directly know is safe, then consider it to be untrusted. This includes hotel Wi-Fi. This includes any Wi-Fi in a cafe or a restaurant. I can give you a myriad of examples where people have logged into hotel Wi-Fi with blueprints of a company's products that it makes, and all of a sudden those blueprints have ended up in the hands of people who have sold them to the highest bidder, and a year later companies are finding fake versions of their products online. Sorry, not online, but out there in the marketplace. For those of you that are using untrusted networks, then set up a VPN that you can trust. And in that way, you ensure that what the VPN does, to explain it to people who may not know this, is it creates a private tunnel between your computer and wherever you're connected to. So anything that, think of a network as water, going through pipes, right? And you're setting up a dedicated pipe that goes from your computer to something that you trust, and it can't get infected by any sewers or any other thing, right? And doing that will at least give you some level of protection when you're using a public network.
That's fabulous. Thanks, Tony. And I think I can echo the VPN piece. I always use a VPN all the time, but especially when I'm out in any kind of public setting, just to make sure that you're safeguarding your privacy.
Correct.
Wonderful, thank you. We've got another question in the chat here from Jorge Ho, or George Ho, not sure how to pronounce that. What's the certification path to get to health information certification? I'm not sure, Tony, would you be able to answer that?
Yeah, that's a good question. If you're referring to the AISA squared certification, which is the HCI SPP, is a healthcare industry certification that AISA squared's created. Effectively, all the certifications you need to sit an exam, and you need to have a level of experience within the healthcare sector that is what's designated under that certification. I don't want to take too much away from today's presentation. If you are interested, just get hold of me separately, and I'm happy to go through that with you and explain it.
Wonderful. Going back to the Q&A now. So we've got a question here from David Hill. I understand that we all need to do our part. Very true. But how do small organizations deal with complex issues?
Yeah,
it's a fantastic question, David.
David, it's a really good question. I'd started typing an answer, and then I realized, you know what, let's deal with this because it's going to be a very long answer. Truth of the matter is, it is a problem, absolutely. And unfortunately, it's a problem that I ask organizations to think of the same way you would think of a physical security problem. So you have an office. Are there locks on the windows? Are there locks on the doors? Do you have, those RAM bars for your warehouse to make sure that people don't ram raid you? They're things that are a pain to have to deal with, but they're a reality of life. Cyber risk and cyber issues are exactly the same way. So from an organizational perspective, it's around shifting that mindset to rather than saying, oh, this isn't a problem, to saying, yes, it actually is a problem. I should budget an amount of money per year to protect myself. Because it's something I need to deal with. It's a double-edged sword. I mean, obviously, information technology has brought us all some very good advances. It's given us new ways of making better business, of making more money. But at the same time, there's a cost of doing business, and this is what that is.
And Tony, just on that, I know for our community sector across in the whole world, I'm sure, but particularly we're at Western Sydney Community Forum, we're particularly familiar with Western Sydney and this region. And I know the community sector, the organisations that we work with and that we work for, don't have a lot of money. We are all there just trying to do things out of goodwill of our hearts most of the time. And whether we've got the money to support that or not is a different story. So how would you say is a bit of a, maybe not a loophole, but how can we overcome that challenge? Do you have any suggestions?
Yeah, it is a good question. My suggestion is, if you do have anyone who is an IT person who looks after the IT resources and the like, if you have them skilled in cybersecurity, that's probably going to be the most cost-effective way, because in that way you have someone who has the ability to be able to do the IT piece and the cyber piece, because they literally are two separate disciplines. So that will help. And the cost of upskilling someone isn't much in that respect. The other things is, of course, you know, I talked about the $5 bicycle and the $100 lock, and I'm not suggesting for a minute that we're dealing in those sorts of sums, but you know, you're going to have vendors come to you and try to sell you the latest and greatest cybersecurity thing, and it's going to cost you $100,000, and you're going to turn around and say, this is insane, right? And the reality is, for those sorts of organizations, you don't need that level of spend, but you do need a minimum level of spend. And someone who's good at cybersecurity is going to be able to say to you, okay, I've got 3 people, well, you've got 3 people as a member of staff, then you should buy yourself this small firewall that's going to cost you $1,000, and it'll protect you for 3 years, because that'll do a good job of ticking a lot of the boxes that are going to be relevant to you. It's not a perfect solution, but it's going to help you considerably by having it.
It's an option. Fantastic. Thanks, Tony. I'm very wary of the time, so we may just address 2 more questions here live. However, we will be sending out some resources, and with that, perhaps, Tony, I will be able to send through the questions that have been unanswered,
Sure.
as well as the ones that we've answered today live, and we can share that with everybody who's registered today's event, if that's okay with you, Tony.
Fantastic.
Brilliant. So the next question we have here is from Vince in the Q&A. So Vince says, it has been widely reported that certain governments put backdoors into a bunch of different programs. How do we know these backdoors have been closed?
We don't. That's the answer. We don't. Simple as that.
Short and sharp. I love it. That's your answer, Vince. Apologies if you're expecting for a bigger one, but I don't think Tony's going to beat around the bush here. I think he's just going to get straight to it.
Sorry, I can't be any better on that one.
And finally, we have an anonymous attendee. Good to see Anonymous there. Like I said, feel free to ask questions anonymously. I know I have in the past. So Anonymous asks, what sort of affordable support services are there for small to medium organisations, such as the ones participating today?
Sure. So this might be a really good question to address towards members of the AISA community generally. There are organisations that are focused on small and medium business. I previously, in my old days, I used to do a lot of work with the SMB sector, and I really enjoyed it, because you know, there were so many issues that I had to deal with, but we got so many good outcomes, and it was really worthwhile. So there are people, particularly, and there's a lot of people who do things even you know, separately on the side, that might be able to assist you. This is where AISA potentially might be a really good resource to leverage those individuals who can help.
Okay, I'm going to be cheeky and throw one last question that's from the chat. So we've got a question here from Teresa. Teresa says, I'm an average small business owner. How would I be able to tell whether I'm cyber healthy or already compromised? What sort of health checks is available and who can help me? Big question. Can you summarize that in approximately 1 minute, Tony?
Okay, so have a look at that ASD Essential 8 guide that's available for free. And if you can tick a number of those boxes, depending on how many you tick, if you can tick all 8, then you're probably doing things reasonably well. If you can't tick any of them, then I would suggest calling someone who can potentially give you some advice. A lot of people are quite happy to come out and say, look, you know, you need to do this, this, and this, and give you a quote for it. So my suggestion is look at that guide. If you do know of those issues and you've dealt with them and you've addressed them, then you're probably on a decent path. If you don't know of any of them and you haven't dealt with them, then you're probably in trouble.
Thanks, Tony. And you did very well to answer that question so well. So there is one thing, we've been talking a lot about resources and the different types of supports that are available. Some, obviously, there's a fee to it, because if you want something good, there's going to be a fee to it. But others are, thankfully, and I suppose it's a fantastic advantage of the goodwill of people that are either very cheap and very much affordable for small and medium-sized organizations and businesses, but some are also free altogether. So what I'm going to show you all is one of the resources, as well as the many that Tony has explained and Matt's shared with as well. I'm going to share another resource here just to give you a quick snippet. I'm just going to show you the front cover of it. And this resource here has been developed by Commonwealth Bank. So Commonwealth Bank has developed this resource to be able to support and help small and medium-sized organizations as well as the not-for-profit. So on here, as I'm sharing now, as you can all see, hopefully, is the damn good advice on cyber safety and fraud prevention. So this is a 76-page document. As you can see, it is available. We will be sharing this with everybody who has registered and who has attended today. It covers a number of different things for the not-for-profit sector and small organizations as well, big, large organizations as well. I suppose this is something that we all need to know. And as we've said through our promotion, this is not a topic or a challenge that only IT workers are needing to be aware of, or your managers. It's across the board in every organization, every business. We all need to be, as I believe David said, all need to be responsible for this. And this is something that, same way we wouldn't leave our houses unlocked. I know when I left my house this morning, I did not leave that unlocked. We wouldn't leave our computers and our data, especially with the clientele these organizations are working with and we all work with. We need to ensure that we're able to keep that secure. So with that, as I said, will be shared with everybody. So you will see that, you will be able to access that at your own time. What I will also do is at the beginning of this session, we asked everyone a question about your understanding of your understanding of cybersecurity, of healthy cybersecurity use and things like that. So what we're going to do now is, as I promised, ask you the same question. And if you don't mind jumping onto menti.com, enter this same code that you did before, and you will be asked a second question, which is the same one. So what is your awareness of cybersecurity requirements for your organizations? And asking this question now, having seen the information that Tony shared with us, having heard the different insights of what resources are available. So please, when you get the opportunity, I see some people have already done so thank you very much. Glad to see there's already improvement on that. So this is what this is all about. This is why Western Sydney Community Forum and New South Wales Treasury and the New South Wales Innovation Node have partnered to do this, to ensure that organizations, small, medium, large businesses, and the community sector are able to feel empowered, are able to learn more and upskill in this area that is so vital in our day-to-day practice, given now especially the pandemic. So thank you very much, everybody, for this. Just a heads up that this will be a weekly series. So same time next week, bring your lunch with you. We won't see you scoffing down your meals, so that's all good. Bring your lunch with you. Be sure to tune in. We'll have a different guest speaker. Thank you, Tony, for joining us for this first session. But next week, we will have a different guest speaker. And you'll also receive a link and a pop-up to enter information in a survey. That form is going to really articulate how we proceed with this series. It's going to be tailored specifically to what you want to gain from this series and what you want to learn, whether that's for yourself individually or for your organization. So please, we really value your opinion, and we're working together, both our organizations working together very closely to ensure that we're able to meet all your needs. So thank you very much for joining us, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your afternoon. See you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for your time.